Good afternoon. Thank you for joining the USHCC for this important issue facing our communities. We appreciate our chamber leaders taking the time to get vital information for your chambers and the small businesses you represent. Today, you're going to hear a lot about Massachusetts, and it has been the testing ground for this issue. But know that we're seeing it pop up all over in many states across the country, and that's why we wanted to bring this to you today. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces. Many of us saw each other last week at the successful 2025 USHGC National Conference in Atlanta. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Anthony Hinojosa. I'm the Vice President of Government and International Affairs here at the USHCC. I will be your host and moderator for today. Today, we're proud to present Understanding Nicotine-Free Generation Policy and How It May Affect Your Business. Let's start with our main presentation. Please allow me to introduce our presenters. Greg DiAgostino on behalf of the New England Convenience Store and Energy Marketers Association, and Frank Marte, President, Boston Convenience Store Owners Association. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Anthony, thank you so much. Really appreciate the warm introduction. And thanks for everyone that's joined the webinar today just to learn a little bit more about this issue. So as you all know, Hispanic-owned businesses comprise a vital part of America's retail landscape. And yet many continue to face unprecedented regulatory challenges that both threaten their survival and the investment that they've made in the community. So the purpose of this session will be to equip USHCC members with the knowledge and tools to navigate what could be one of the most significant policy challenges facing convenience store retailers in the future. With that, I'll let Frank introduce himself.
Hey, thank you guys. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Anthony. My name is Francisco Marte, and I'm the president of Boston Convenience Store Association. As long as we continue together, so we continue fighting. As Greg mentioned, it's been a very long time fight that we've been having trying to stay alive. Our convenience stores owners who actually is dependent on their business, a small corner store for years, decades, I would say. And at this moment, we really been suffering very hard for the situation that we've been presented. And if they continue doing what they're doing or what is presented to be done, uh, it's look like those convenience store basically will be and very hurt, and those families of those people is going to be hurting by down the road. And most importantly, is a tobacco industry is this is over 600-700 years or maybe more than that. Which and this is the industry has been working for so long, and at this point, in life it's like they were taking away the opportunity to somebody else to can choose whatever they want to do in life after a certain age that people can do it. So this prohibition can really uh, take down the industry. So this is very important topic what we're treating today.
Frank, thank you for that. So Anthony, I just want to give a little background on what this policy is. Not everyone's heard of it. We have seen it arisen throughout the country, though the concentration of the activity has centered here in Massachusetts, which, as we'll get to later, is in fact the testing ground for many tobacco policies that directly impact convenience store owners all across the country. So what NFG is, it's called nicotine-free generation. It represents a fundamental shift from traditional age-based restrictions to a birth year prohibition that never expires. So just to give you a real-world example, in Brookline, Massachusetts, a 24-year-old born in 2001 can never purchase any type of tobacco or nicotine products, even though their 25-year-old friend that was born in December 1999 can make the same legal purchase. So it's sort of a forever policy that is really hard to manage from a retail standpoint for a number of reasons. In particular, unlike alcohol or other age-restricted products where turning 21 grants access, NFG creates a permanent barrier based solely on when someone was born. So that person would never have the opportunity to legally purchase tobacco and nicotine products, whether they were 30, 50, 70 years old. And it creates lots and lots of problems for retailers and consumers alike, and feeds a pretty significant black market. So I'd like to give you just a little bit of background on it. So Brookline, Massachusetts, what led the charge in this movement back in 2020, and then it got adopted in 2021, becoming the first municipality globally to implement a nicotine-free generation policy. And as many will tell you, as this navigated through the committee process locally, there really wasn't any support for the policy as it went through their governing body, their public health board, their small business committees. So despite that, despite not having support through a very rigorous committee hearing and review process, they were able to get the votes in town meeting to support and get this passed through. Um, since that time, over 17 Massachusetts communities, specifically municipalities, have adopted NFG policies. And right now, there's a bill in the Massachusetts legislature considering doing this statewide in this 2025-2026 session. And so, why is that important to all your USHCC members? What we have seen time and time again is that Massachusetts' influence on these tobacco policies and regulations extend naturally. The state has historically pioneered tobacco regulations that later spread nationwide, including both 21, moving the legal age of purchase from 18 to 21, right? We saw that play out first at the state level and then ultimately being adopted at the federal level, and flavor restrictions that started here in Massachusetts, ended up getting adopted as a state level policy. And now we've seen that policy proliferate throughout the country in both municipalities and at the state level, with California and different iterations of a flavor ban in New York. And, in particular on NFG legislation, we haven't seen it introduced in Tennessee, Hawaii, Indiana, and California. And so, as we think about Massachusetts now starting to actually implement it at the municipal level, and it being a serious consideration for the Massachusetts legislature, it's important for people to start to understand and know about this issue so that when it pops up either in their community or in their state legislature, that they've got some resources and tools and understanding to be able to go and be articulate about why this policy may actually not meet its intended public health goals, and in fact is a huge burden on retailers for a number of reasons.
Right.
So, as I mentioned before, everyone's familiar with the traditional legal age of purchase laws. Very easy to be compliant with, which I know all of your members and really stores nationally. There's a very high compliance rate with age verification, but they're using both point of sale systems to make sure that IDs are being verified, or a year in which a person needed to be born in order to be legal. And if they have stores from one municipality to another, or from one state to another, it's really easy with a uniform standard for them to be able to verify IDs, to train their employees, to have their point of sale systems implemented in such a way that they can execute regularly against that compliance. When you start to change that uniform standard, even across town lines or state lines, that becomes very challenging for convenience store owners to execute against that
Right.
differing standard, right? Whether it's training employees, some of which may work in multiple stores, implementing their age verification through their point of sale system, and having to change that not only potentially from town to town, but every single year. Obviously, if it's one uniform standard, that system can do that on its own. Um, so it creates a lot of problems for retailers and a lot of compliance problems that, then erode the intent of, not only meeting what the law and regulation says, but ultimately keeping tobacco out of the hands of youth. And, as we've talked about in some of our conversations leading up to this, retailers are the stewards of keeping tobacco out of the hands of youth. They do that by verifying IDs, spending money and time to train employees, implementing systems that they invest their dollars in to keep tobacco out of the hands of youth. And that's why, these policies, when they get implemented, are so puzzling, right? Because it really takes away from um, their ability to do that consistently, and it starts to create some black market issues. The other issue with this is it starts to create two classes of legal adults with different rights. So certainly, I think there's some constitutional concerns as it relates to that, and something to be mindful. The other thing I wanted to touch on that I think is important is I think, a disproportionate impact often on Latino and Hispanic businesses. So generally, these tend to be more independent stores, either standalone stores or just a handful of stores owned by Hispanic convenience store owners, and they don't have the same amount of time to track all these regulations, engage with the bodies that are considering them, and fight against some of these regulations that ultimately going to impact their business and their ability to uh, maintain compliance with all the regulations. Frank, I don't know if you have any thoughts that you wanted to share on that.
Oh no, definitely. In the short words, is this continue the way it goes? Is like I'm saying before. This is going to be the end, and this is going to produce a serious count in the street. By the way, uh, right now, if you're seeing in the marijuana is legal almost in every other state in the country, and what was illegal, all right, is going to turn around by this type of legislation. You will see it back in the day when the alcohol was illegal, tobacco was going to become illegal, and that's how the black market is going to be. So those guys, those people who can actually put their hand on the product, that is going to be a totally disaster down the road. In the next 5, 10 years, you will see how much traffickers is going to be involved. Instead of trafficking drugs and all this stuff or alcohol, they're going to be doing tobacco, because this is what this type of legislation. That's this type of legislation produce.
Yeah, and Frank, I know you've seen that in your stores and right outside your stores when Massachusetts implemented the flavor ban. I know the Boston Convenience Store Owners Association invested in tracking some of that illicit activity that was happening in the streets outside your doors, where
Right.
people weren't checking IDs, where they weren't subject to random inspections, where they weren't permitted, they weren't licensed. So not only does it create some real risks from a public health perspective, creating more access to the products that are banned, but it impacts and hurts your business too, because now they're not coming through the door.
No, that not only that they don't come in through the door, but the problem is that it's no control, and you can sell it to anybody. So my concern is, yes, I control the nicotine product because I have stores and that my group of Latino business or associated, we control that product. We don't let that product go out in the street without, like you say, we invest in time, we invest money and equipment, teaching workers. We work with, we kind of work with everyone and associated to control this. We're working with the school. I'm going to the school. I work with the children just to keep them away from this. But unfortunately, with this type of legislation, they're going to do the same thing what happened to the drug. The minors and anyone would take access to this product. And that's something that we really don't want that happen. But again, this type of legislation, they don't care. In the past years, we did have we did fight a lot. We advocated all over the place here in the state. Um, we have videos, like you mentioned. I got pictures, I got video, I have proof for all of that. I still have it. I got all those recorders and all those videos and money that we invest in. We kind of investigated company to make those things happenings. And honestly, what we see it in the street was something ridiculous. When I approached the police, which and I have a good relation with the police, guess what? Even that I have a good relation with the police, they don't do anything. They won't do anything to stop anyone who's selling product in the street without any type of regulation. So this is the type of action that happens when this type of regulation appear to be.
Yeah, and I know Frank, just from having been in your store and visited the neighborhood a bunch of times. I mean, a store like yours and like many other of the USHCC members, they serve as neighborhood anchors, right? They're sources for employment, they're community gathering spaces. I remember standing in your store one day waiting to talk to you for maybe about an hour,
Oh
and
man.
it truthfully, it was a center point during the daytime for people to come in and converse and get food and the different goods that they needed. But there was a real community aspect to it, and I know that is very, very true in your store, having spent some time there. And that also gets eroded by these onerous regulations, again, that don't actually move the needle on public health, that take away the protections that the store owners put in place with checking IDs and using systems and training to make sure that compliance is met.
Man, definitely, man. This is one another topic. Most importantly, that a convenience store has. You really work hand to hand with your community, and as you improve, you came to my store once, a few times, and it's a line of people, and just to say hi, Frank, how are you? Hey, we shake hand, and you really have connection with your people. So that means all those children, I seen children that I was not even born. I know family that I wasn't even have children. Now they 20, 30, 30, 40, even 40 years, 35, 40 years old. And today those kids, you can see they very well educated guys, very educated people from the community. Well, in my first years as a convenience store owners back in the 90, 93, 94, to be in the street, it was very tough. But as you go in modeling and working with your community, you really make that difference when the people trust in what you do and they send your children to the store. You got that type of respect in that community. So this is what community store and the community need in this and to have in his community is people who really care about it. And this is most of the convenience store doing. But again, this type of legislation is really going to disappear the convenience stores.
Yeah. So, and just, reflecting back on some of the things that we were just talking about relative to these products now being sold outside that regulated market, I want to give people some insight on, what are we talking about when we go and speak with decision makers, whether it's a municipality, whether it's someone that's a state representative or a state senator, what should we be thinking about that they should be concerned about? So there's a lot of unintended consequences to moving these products out of the regulated environment. We see massive illicit market growth. So beyond just telling you that, I want to give you statistics. So Massachusetts flavored tobacco ban resulted in a 21,000% surge in black market activity, and that is based on a state task force that reported that information. That's not retail information. So I'm going to say that again. The Massachusetts flavored tobacco ban resulted in a
Wow.
21,000% surge in black market activity. So when you're talking to decision makers, right, who may look at this at the surface and say, this is, great policy. It keeps tobacco out of the hands of youth. Well, again, the only people that are actually keeping tobacco out of the hands of youth are convenience store owners and retailers. They're the only people that check IDs. They're the only people that invest in training of employees. They're the only people that invest in the systems required to make sure that that compliance is adhered to. And so when you take those gates away, right, those unannounced inspections that occur, you are growing the access to the products that you're trying to ban. So that's an important point when you're talking to legislators, because I think that really clicks pretty easily and they start to understand, oh, wait, you, the retailer, the USHCC member, you are the gatekeeper, and we're taking that protection away. In addition to that, I think the illicit market creates additional law for enforcement challenges and community safety risks. So, Frank, we think about your neighborhood. It's very much a melting pot of people that are working hard and trying to do all the right things, and then people that aren't trying to do all the right things. And when we
Yes.
create more criminality within those neighborhoods, it erodes some of the good community that's been built.
Right. Well, it's a little hard for me to not to continue fighting. I have to fight for this. I've been doing in the convenience store for so long. I have seen things all over the place. As you know, if you come to this close place, which is called Ashmont, you go to Ashmont, you find type of cigarettes all over the place without having any registration, any checked ID, anyone's. So you're not wrong. You're right about it. We created more criminality. Um, but like I say, uh, who can stop this? We have to fight for this. I will do it to the end. But honestly, Craig, I really want to understand who really going to pay attention to this. What type of legislator we're really going to get involved in this? At first, I know this is starting by the health department and city of Boston, and then so many other get involved. But at the end, they just made a catastrophe in here. By the way,
Yeah.
this is totally a catastrophe.
Well, I think you make a good point. Who's going to carry that torch, Frank, and go and talk to these decision makers that are considering these types of regulations and laws. And that's exactly why we're doing this webinar today, to sort of ground people in some real information that they can utilize when they're having those conversations. Because it's really the retailers that, are charged with going out and educating these decision makers, because they're only getting one side of the story. They're only hearing about how this is going to keep nicotine out of the hands of the next generation, right? Hence the name of the policy. But what is being ignored in that advocacy is the stuff that we were just talking about. The black, creating the black market. You're creating it, you're making it new,
Yeah.
right? You're creating that, taking away the safeguards that are put in place through retailer licensing and permitting that allows for unannounced inspections, that makes someone cut a check and display a license every single year so that we know where these products are being sold. And so ultimately, I think it does fall to the convenience store owners to get organized, as you have done so well in organizing your fellow retailers in Boston, to show up and make sure that this part of the story is told. So
Another point that I want to touch in here now is that, like the city of Boston has approved basically alcohol in every corner of the street. As you might know, I don't know if you know this already, but anyone who wants an alcohol license right now is very easy to get it. So why so much alcohol in the street and there is no regulation for, which I believe is more dangerous than any other thing. You see more children going to school drunk, plenty, and you can find alcohol in every corner now. So why are we going to have so much regulation in the tobacco industry when the alcohol is public and everywhere?
yeah, yeah, and Boston and Massachusetts both have expanded that footprint pretty dramatically in 2025. And I just want to touch a little bit on the market and business impact. So, as we've been talking about, when you have a birth year delineation that never goes away, it's that wall that I mentioned before. You are eroding your customer base every single year. The pool of eligible customers go away, And, when you're keeping in mind that you are the gatekeepers, the folks that have been making sure these products don't get to the people that aren't supposed to have it, that's a little tough to take it on the chin. The reality is that tobacco products represent, 25 to 35% of convenience store inside sales. And so this has a significant business impact, not only because they may not be purchasing tobacco and nicotine products, but there's other goods like drinks and snacks or food that they need to feed their families that then they may not be buying inside the store.
Man, if I tell you what the people buy in the morning when they get to your store is they buy the milk, the cigarette, they get the sugar, they get the cup of coffee, they get the bread, the milk, but at the same time they got their cigarette. So if you see it, we don't even make that much money in the tobacco, in the cigarette, right? But the really cool, the father or the mother come to the store, not the children. So that's actually is what really make the difference on what you just said. So it's really hurt our business, and it's really going to cause a very serious issue in our stores.
Yeah, and that's even highlighted, Frank, when it's happening in one town but not another, right? So you've got a customer base that comes to your store every day that gets all
That
those
is
sundry
so.
goods.
Yeah,
And in some of these places, they can walk 3 blocks up the street because the town line's there. And now that's where they're getting all of their products. And so,
correct.
I think that highlights the need when you see this happening at the local level to really get engaged and make sure, again, decision makers that are considering these policies and regulations are thinking about those aspects that the product is still accessible nearby legally, but it's going to have a direct impact on your store because they're not coming to your store for milk, but going up the street to get their tobacco products. The customer just goes away. You lose them forever.
Right.
Um, I just want to highlight again, Massachusetts, as we have seen with 21 flavor bans and now NFG. This is a testing ground. And I just want to highlight this again because, we're going to have USHCC members from all around the country taking a look at this and saying, wow, they're talking a lot about Massachusetts. I'm in Tennessee or I'm in California or I'm in Texas. Why do I care? And I think there's a very strong track record, a fact-based track record that if you see it here in Massachusetts and sometimes California, it is going to end up coming to your state, to your municipality, and it's going to have an impact for your business. And so what we wanted to make sure that we did in having this conversation now, where you may not be facing this threat, is to know it's out there because of its gigantic impact that it can have. And we want to make sure that members have the tools to understand the issue, to understand the discussions that they can have with policymakers that may consider this if it does come to their jurisdiction in the future, and do that before it's too late. And Frank, I know you guys have fought in Boston vigorously against some of these, and sometimes successfully, just to have it come up again the next year.
Right. Right. No, again, this is only producing cows. And like I said, you mentioned before, right? This is going to go to your state, it's going to get to your city. But keep it in mind that what is coming to your city is the black market. And what is coming to your state is the illegal product that really going to hurt your economy, and it's going to make more damage to the society. So let's see how we can handle that message directly to in a
Yeah.
better way, right?
Well, so and that's what I got here up on my next slide. So we understand the issue. We've got some background on the argumentation, which is strong, right? This is not a policy that once you peel back one layer of the onion makes a lot of sense. It certainly doesn't provide for the protection of public health when you're now making this product more accessible, excuse me, and less regulated. So a lot of times when we're dealing with policymakers, the question is, okay, if not this, then what? Well, they have the opportunity in their jurisdiction, whether it's a municipality or state, to actually enact legislation that codifies the legal age of purchase. We had this really unique issue in Massachusetts when the retailers challenged the Brookline decision, that the Supreme Court in Massachusetts came back and actually said, well, because there's not a law that says it has to be 21, they're just allowed to at 21. Um, the municipality has the right to move the age. So there's some legislation pending right now that's being supported by the retail community throughout the state, called legal age of purchase. And what it does is it says in this state, in this jurisdiction, at the age of 21, you can do the following: purchase alcohol from a licensed store, purchase tobacco. In Massachusetts, we have sports gaming, and it actually codifies that. And the Massachusetts legislation codifying the legal age of purchase actually has some preemption language in it. So it says, not only is this the age everywhere in this jurisdiction, but any jurisdiction within the state of Massachusetts that's changed it, that goes away. And so that it rebalances the state. So you've got one legal age of purchase, and all those complications that we talked about related to compliance or growing the black market, are eradicated. I think the other thing that's important to touch on is, because retailers by and large across the country, especially Frank, as you mentioned, in the state of Massachusetts, they do a great job. We see smoking rates continue to decline significantly. We also saw after the flavor ban in Massachusetts that the usage of the product didn't go down in any appreciable way. They were just getting it through other channels, whether it was cross-border sales or illegal products. So the use of that product, in particular, that was banned, didn't even go down. So what are our options, right? Keep the product in a regulated market with the
Yep.
retailers that are doing the right thing, and continue to educate the community about the dangers of tobacco use, especially obviously people that aren't old enough to consume the product, and use that as the tool and the resource rather than just taking these adult products, and they're adult products for a reason, out of the regulated, licensed, and permitted environment. So just to build on that a little bit, Anthony, as you and I have been working on, we've created some real tools, right? So we understand independent store owners, even if you own a handful of stores, it's really hard to get your head wrapped around this. Write a letter, write an email, be prepared to testify if there's a hearing on these regulations. So we built a toolkit. It's going to be accessible alongside this webinar. So we put together talking points. We put together public meeting scripts to just help inform people's comments when they go and attend these hearings. We've got an education flyer so that they can let other members of the community know, customers, other retailers, and just generally citizens that might be concerned about these types of regulations for many of the reasons that we talked about. And then I know, Anthony, folks can always reach out to you and Santiago and say, hey, this came up. I remember we heard about this and we started to learn about it, but I need some help. I need to, some guidance through all these great materials that USHCC is providing. I need some help personalizing them or getting some facts and information pulled together. So, as soon as the webinar is posted, we'll put that toolkit up and make that available to all the members. But keeping in mind that there's, opportunities to reach back out directly to USHCC to get some additional assistance with those materials. So with that, Anthony, I think you've all heard me talk enough already. Hopefully, this gave a really good background on not only what the issue is, but why there's really strong arguments that it ought not to be implemented, that appeal to a very broad audience, right? No one wants to see black market activity No one wants to see adult products taken out of a regulated environment when you stop and really think about what the implications of that are. No one wants to harm a business just because it sounds good, right? Which is, I think, largely what this policy does. It sounds good when you say it until you peel that first layer of the onion back. And then knowing that now with that background and with some of that argumentation that you would share, that there's actually some tools if this comes to your municipality, comes to your state, that you can be able to utilize to kind of bring these elements together and advocate on behalf of your store, advocate on behalf of your customers, your community, and the like.
Thank you so much, Greg and Frank. That was a very informative presentation. I think today we all walked away learning that NFG really poses a threat to Hispanic-owned businesses across the country and all small businesses, even if it's not yet in your community or in your state. The unintended consequences extend beyond business and into the health and well-being of our communities. I applaud the both of you for the excellent job of showing how Massachusetts was kind of this test case study and how it could potentially proliferate across the country into other municipalities and city businesses, and really showing the negative impacts that it could go on. But right now, I'd like to move on to kind of discuss NFG with you, Greg and Frank, and dive a little deeper into this topic if you guys have a few more minutes for us. That'd be all right?
Sure.
Wonderful. So this NFG issue seems to have a lot of layers and impacts for the Hispanic business community. Frank, could you walk us through how the policies affect your daily convenience store operations? Tell us that story that really impacted your operations and how you dealt with that.
Well, through the years, I've been so long running this business that I've been through a lot. Like at this moment, I feel like I'm driving a Mercedes or a Ferrari because I know it's with all the issues that we're going through in the past. So it is true. We've been fighting so much, especially with day to day with the community to make sure that we really engage a good relation and have a good communication with our leaders and our community. It's been tough to deal with it. The industry is not just the tobacco industry or the energy or whatever is going on. Right now, we've been suffering very hard, and it's not it isn't time for anyone's like continue driving customer to your store. There's so much business going on. Those largest industry, those large companies, really killing our stores, and those regulations and the laws that apply to those huge corporations is not the same for the same laws for the small convenience stores runners. But the truth is, we have spent so much energies and times and working with our community with uh, to really have the real connection with it and control it what is illegal in the street, making sure that we promote the right education to our customers, driving a better leadership in the business, keeping our community straight, your street and very clean, by the way, clean on the way that we're trying not to have the black market controlling what is legal, turn it into an illegal business. So it's not been an easy thing. But for the past 3 decades that I've been running convenience store, I can tell you that I am so proud and be a convenience owner because I have treated so many people. I've seen so many children grow up becoming already police officer, engineer, doctors, and all those things only happens when you have the right direction in your community. Um, again, my times as a convenience store owner has been a very grateful time. But again, if we continue doing the way that we're doing it and we don't find the right direction and the right legislation coming, convenience stores actually are going to suffering so much that I predicted by the next 5 years, over 50% of the convenience stores going to disappear. which is really going to turn the street and a serial count. And it wouldn't be that kind of movement in the street, that type of relation in every corner. By the way, me as a convenience store, again, it's hard, very hard to continue fighting with someone that, with something that nobody listened. I really appointing Greg a minute ago, which one should be the right direction that we actually could go and find the legislator that we can appointing and work on this situation right. So yeah, I think we should continue fighting. Stores owners cannot put their head down. That is something that we shouldn't do it. Um, and yeah, we should push much as we can. At the end, we might get a right result.
Awesome. Thank you, Frank, and I kindly accept that Maserati ride when I head to Boston next time. So
Oh man,
have it ready for me.
Definitely.
Greg, would you talk a little bit about those kind of case studies in Massachusetts, Brookline, Manchester by the Sea, and talk about how owners and businesses had to adapt to this, just kind of generally, but a little bit of depth.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's funny because we've, been sort of all doom and gloom up to this point, but um, there are some really good results that we have found in municipalities in the state of Massachusetts that have passed this or haven't passed it for a number of reasons. So Manchester by the Sea, their Board of Health, right, an appointed board, not elected, um, passed a nicotine-free generation policy. And as folks in the town learned about it, for all the reasons that we've been talking about, alongside with the retailers in Manchester by the Sea, they mounted a campaign to actually bring this to town meeting, right? That's essentially the town's legislative body. And so they put a article on the warrant to repeal what Manchester by the Sea Board of Health had done. And the reason for that is what we were talking about, just a few minutes ago. When you peel one layer of this onion back, it's bad public policy. So, of course, there's the business harm aspect of it, right? Residents don't want to see their businesses impacted in this way, but it's not even good public health policy, right? Because of, creating that illicit market and taking away the regulatory aspects of it. And then we have seen other towns like Bellingham where it wasn't passed, but it was put up as a ballot initiative. I'm sorry, a article on their warrant for their town meeting, and resoundingly it was defeated. And that's because the retailers came together. They worked to educate their customers. They actually did a mailer that had gone out in advance of that town meeting. And just that one mailer that provided some of this backdrop and education about the issue, people in the town said no. It's an
Hmm.
open town meeting. They showed up and they said no. And so I think there's a lot to be gleaned from that, in that when you have the tools, when you put forward the effort to peel back that layer of the onion and go out and talk to people, whether it's customers, residents, decision makers, um, it's pretty easy to win this argument because it's really not right in terms of its intended effect and impact. And so, I hope I say that because A, it's true relative to those communities. But I hope that encourages people to say, okay, if we put a little effort forward here, we can get this to the right place so that they continue to be the stewards of keeping the tobacco out of the hands of youth, being the stewards of their neighborhood, and not inviting black market activity into their places where they're investing in having nice stores and providing resources for the community.
And just a quick follow up to that. Have you seen or have any of your group seen this potentially be going up to the state house as legislation or as discussions have happened in Massachusetts?
Yeah, and we've got a bill pending there right now. This is the first session that was introduced, and the reality is it normally doesn't get passed the first time it's introduced. But not just in Massachusetts, really around the country, right? Colorado is another good example as you look at the flavor ban there. New York's a good example. California's a good example. A lot of times the strategies around getting these types of policies adopted are doing it locally first and gathering enough support at the local level so that the state legislature, excuse me, is sort of compelled to pass it. But here's what's interesting about that. A lot of times the reason that this is introduced at the local level is because visibility is limited. Store owners are less likely to know that it's happening, right? Because municipal action can happen a lot quicker. And, we've seen some very explicit ways in which they're trying to make sure that people don't know that these policies are being pushed. So they're going into these towns, store owners have limited to no notice. They don't have time to organize. They don't have time to inform their customers about this. And then it passes. And they try to replicate that in a bunch of municipalities so that they can walk up to the state house in whatever state they're in and say, "Oh, look, all these communities passed this. You're now sort of compelled to do it yourself." So we often see local activity precede state action. Um, it's very much sort of the playbook and makes it more important to try to monitor this to the degree that you can at the local level and to have that toolkit that you guys are providing, at your fingertips so that when things happen quickly, you've got tools to activate and get in front of decision makers.
One
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Greg. Oh, please.
one thing that we should point in, Greg, is you mentioned that the bad communication that is going through the convenience stores owners and the customer or the people that they don't get informed on time. I think we should continue or at least starting getting some type of information quickly as we can to the convenience stores. Uh, we can get at least all those convenience stores owners that really need to be informed in the situation that we are. I have connected with few stores owner already, explaining the situation. We talked already about few. Gray, you know some of them, especially the Patel family. They have so many stores and also many liquor stores and gas stations in the city or across the state. And we've been informed about this legislation. So if it's something that we can uh, cooperate to make this happen, we really are open to the support as the cases help not to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's important, Frank. That coalition building, reaching out to your fellow impacted retailers because they also have their own customers as well, is, a really important part of this, especially if the turnaround time between when you learn of it and when it's going to be voted on or considered in front of a hearing. The old adage, there's strength in numbers.
Absolutely. Thank you, gentlemen.
Correct.
Being a 20-year government relations professional, this is kind of the stuff I always want to talk about. But kind of playing off of this, advocacy and outreach will play a larger part in the outcome of this debate. How can business owners engage with their local boards of health, their local legislators, their state legislators, and even nationally before NFG is considered in their states or in their cities?
Yeah, I think there's a few different opportunities to manage that. We recognize, as I talked about before, many store owners are spending their time trying to keep the lights on, the employees happy, the customers happy, paying rent, right? And it's really hard sometimes to monitor this stuff in the way that you would want to, right? Which is sometimes why we see independent store owners be a little disadvantaged from their larger corporate counterparts, right? The large corporations just have more resources and time to pay someone to focus on that. So I would first recommend getting involved with organizations like USHCC, local chambers of commerce, neighborhood organizations that monitor this stuff. Like the work that I do at the New England Convenience Store and Energy Marketers Association, they push something out every week in their newsletter that has, a little summary on local tobacco regulatory action. So if you're in, Chelsea, Massachusetts, you could just look at their newsletter and say, oh, something's happening in Chelsea, or there's nothing happening in Chelsea. I don't need to worry about it. So, first I would say get tapped into some kind of local resource that's monitoring the regulations that affect your store, whether it's, bottle bills, tobacco regulations. This isn't just about tobacco. It's about all of the different things that could impact your store. So I'd say that that's probably the most vital piece, because invariably some of this stuff will arise when you're not paying attention. I think the second, component to that is getting organized with the people that you know best, fellow retailers and customers, because they're going to help be able to create that chorus of voices arguing against these onerous regulations that don't really move the needle. And then, you guys are providing a really wonderful toolkit so that people have something that they can draw off of, right? We're all busy. Sometimes it's hard to sit down and articulate a letter and understand what all that argumentation is that they've listened to me spout off on for almost an hour. So you guys are providing those tools. So it's stay engaged with the organizations that are tracking this, USHCC and others, to stay informed so that information is being pushed at you. Go to the people that you know the best, fellow retailers, customers, help them join into that course, and then of course leverage the materials that you guys are going to be providing to members, so that they've got some tools that they can readily, personalize and share with decision makers.
Excellent. Thank you, Greg. It's always great when you're the moderator and they preempt your next statement by joining your chamber of commerce, joining your local association. That was really the thing. But for my last question, I want to turn it into quick 1 or 2 word, quick lightning round. So as business owners and chambers are discussing these issues in their communities, with boards of health, just refuting NFGs isn't enough. What is the one argument that you're finding the most helpful that provides an alternative to NFGs that help balance the public health and economic concerns?
I think it's really around that the legal age of purchase that we were talking about, because when you're having a conversation, with a decision maker, right? That's conversations happening between two adults. If we pulled 10 people from the room that we're in and said, how old do you need to be to purchase a bottle of beer, or to purchase a package of nicotine pouches, or to go to the casino, everyone's going to have a uniform understanding of that. And so just that relatable aspect of everyone personalizing it in whatever way makes sense for them. They like to buy the bottle of beer, or they like to go to the casino, or whatever it might be. Um, I think is a very quick way to make the connection. And so the next sort of iteration of that is to say, well, if we all understand that to be true, can't we just codify that and preempt any of this activity that might come up in the future? Like I said, the Massachusetts legal age of purchase legislation that's pending right now that would be in favor of the retailers preempts any of that local action. It actually undoes any of the local action that's already occurred. And so that's a real common sense, proactive way to manage this issue. So rather than looking at that list and waiting till it comes to your front door, go out and have those conversations with decision makers and say, hey, this issue's coming down. We don't know when it's coming down, but there's a way we can fix it right now. And it's something that we all believe to be true sitting here today, that uniform age. And it becomes an easier conversation, especially when there's not other people on the other side pushing a different narrative.
Absolutely. Well, I want to again thank you, Greg and Frank, for the amazing presentation and this robust conversation. I know our chamber leaders and business owners are now more educated on NFG and are ready if and when it comes to become an issue in their communities. I'd like to take a few minutes. We only have a couple of minutes. If there's anybody in the audience who has a question for myself, Greg, or Francisco, or for Frank, please feel free to raise your hand and ask.
I think we covered it all, Anthony. We got to all of it.
I think you guys crushed it. It's amazing. So let me just thank everyone for being here. Greg, Frank, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for this very, very important issue, and really educating our chamber leaders and our business owners to be on the watch out for this and what they can do immediately if they are facing it. I'd also like to thank our national partners who are part of this, the USHCC team who has made this possible, and each one of our chamber leaders who took the time today. I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having us, Anthony.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.